In this episode, we'll be cutting all the mortises for the Domino connectors, as well as our solid wood tenons. And then we'll sand everything down, get all my pencil marks off, so then I can do a dry fit. So with all the holes drilled, and I've got my panels laid out where they're gonna fall, next thing I wanna do is get down to the details and lay out where each and every mortise goes. I'm not pulling any measurements, they're just reference marks for me. Because I'm gonna be flipping back and forth, it gets a little confusing. Again, I'm not drawing any measurements. All the accuracy is going to be from the domino itself. These are just reference marks for me. So with all the holes drawn for the mortises, now I can draw the hole for where this domino connector is going to go. I'm just going to have two in each end of the panel. So I'll put one right here, one right here, there. Again, these are just reference marks. They're not exact measurements. The domino will give me the exact measurements. So when I'm putting all these panels together, rather than having 25 clamps in my way, this will work as a clamp holding those pieces together as I get everything glued up. So I've made all the adjustments to the domino with the correct settings. I've got my fence height set to 20 millimeters. That can be left for pretty much the whole project. All my material is about 3/4 of an inch, which is about 18 to 19 millimeters. I've also got the depth set. That's set at 28 millimeters. Now, I'm using an 8x40 tenon. Typically, you want half the tenon in one piece and half the tenon in the other piece. So that'd be 20 millimeters and 20 millimeters. But because I'm using these domino connectors, when I put these in here, I have to plunge at 28 millimeters for this. So that means I'm going to have an offset tenon. You're going to have two settings, 28 millimeters and 15 millimeters through the whole process. Think about when you're plunging in to the end of a panel, I can go as deep as I want. That's your 28 millimeters. But if I'm plunging down into the panel, I don't want to go 28 millimeters because that'll blow through the back of the panel. So that's when you're always set to 15. Remember, I said I'm going to rely on the accuracy of the machine. That's why I added these cross stops, because I can preset the dimensions in between each mortise. Then I'm completely relying on the accuracy of the machine. Now I'm going to have 6 mortises on the bottom of this panel. Only 3 of them are going to be tight. The rest are going to be loose. The first one that's tight is going to be my alignment mortise, which will reference off of one edge of the plywood to keep all my panels aligned. The other 2 are going to be for these domino connectors. Those have to be tight. The rest can be loose to help with the assembly process. So for this first mortise, or my alignment mortise, I'll be using the flaps on the domino, which is exactly 37 millimeters from the flap to the center of the bit. So the second one is still going to be the tight setting. It's going to be for one of my domino connectors. And I'm going to reference this pin off the edge of my plywood. So the next 2 are going to be in the loose setting. To do that, I have to make sure the domino is running to change this dial. So with 2 mortises to go, the next one is going to be for the connector. So I have to make that a tight mortise, and then the last one will be a loose mortise. So with those holes done, I can flip the panel around and do the mortises on the other side. And this is exactly why I talk so much about labeling everything. Because when you start flipping panels around, you start getting confused. But if you have your marks on here, you know which side you need to reference your machine off of. So this side of the panel will be the same process. I have 2 tight, 2 loose, 1 more tight, and then 1 more loose. But I'll be starting from this side, because if you remember, I flipped my panel around. So with the end panel mortises done, I can work on the bottom panel mortises. So when I do these, I'm going to be in the vertical position. So I've added the support base for a little more support. One other thing we have to make sure we do is switch over to 15mm plunge depth so I don't plunge all the way through my bottom panel. The mortise width setting will mirror what I've done previously. Also, I haven't pulled out a tape measure yet. I'm still relying only on the measurements of the Domino. So with all the mortises complete in that far left panel, the next thing I need to do is put the mortises in the top piece of plywood where the MFT is going to sit. So I've gone ahead and flipped that over, and now I'll follow the same process I've done to this point. So the next step in the process is to drill the hole for this part of the Domino connector. To do that, the Domino connectors come with a drill guide as well as a drill bit with a collar stop on it, so I can only drill so deep. This drill guide fits right inside my 8mm tenon. Lines everything up, the rest is easy. Same process for the other hole. So with those two holes cut, I can flip the panel around and do the last two on this panel. So this end panel is completely finished. Now I can start working my way to the other panels from left to right. Gone ahead and I've clamped a board on my center panel right where that center divider goes. So now I can take my Domino, reference the back of that right off that board, use my flap on both sides, and I've got one center line drawn to put a mortise right in the center. This board is just for reference purposes only. I'm not actually going to mortise into it. So with this all done, we can start to focus on the mortises on the center divider. Because my end panel is going to be pushing the center panel in 3/4 of an inch, I'm just going to use the side of the Domino to reference off the side of this panel. I'm not going to be using any flaps. Because this center panel will be locked into place from the end panels and then the top and bottom, I can go ahead and make all those mortises loose. So the next thing I'm going to do is put the mortises in the end of the center divider to attach to the first panel. I'll do the mortises here, and then I'll start to do the mortises in the center. For attaching the center panel to the back divider, I'm just going to put 3 mortises in. 2 wood tenons and then 1 connector in the middle to lock it all together. So this is the center panel opposite of the panel that I just did on the other side of the divider. So I can complete the same exact process as I did on the other one, and then we can move on to the end panel. So now that we've got the backs of our center panels mortised, I need to do the bottoms, so they will lock into the bottom panel as well. Now up to this point, the way I've been doing those is I'll line it up with the lines I've already drawn on my board, clamp them down, and then I can run my mortises in this direction and then reference the base of the Domino off of this panel to mortise down that direction. But because since this panel is wider, I can clamp on the outside, but I can't clamp here in the middle, and it makes it a little wobbly for me. So what I can do is push those out of the way, get my Festool guide rail, line the back side up with that pencil line. Now I can reference my Domino off of that. On this edge, I've got the edge to reference off of with my flap. That'll bring it in 37mm. So on the other end, all I need to do is just hold my panel up here and just draw a pencil line on both pieces of material. Now I've got a reference mark here, and I've got a reference mark here. I'm gonna make my front mortise a loose mortise, and then this mortise on the back, the tight mortise. So I went ahead and flipped the center panels over. I'm gonna switch my plunge depth to 28. Now it's just a matter of referencing off this edge with my flaps and then using those 2 lines I drew before to make the mortises. Then I can drill my 2 holes for my connectors. As I'm laying out these two panels for mortises, I keep running into clamping issues. So rather than struggle any further, I'm going to get the STM 1800 out of here, and I'll bring in the MFT3. That'll give me a lot more clamping possibilities. So with that all laid out, I can go ahead and put mortises in both of those panels and drill the holes for the connectors on the backside. You may choose not to use the Domino connectors and just use clamps to assemble the entire project. That's totally fine. If you do use solid wood tenons, that's going to change whether your mortises are loose or tight depending on how you design your project. So now I can unclamp these two, set this one aside, and drill the holes for the connectors. While I'm set up for drilling holes, I'll go ahead and flip this around and drill the connector holes on this end as well. With those mortises done, I can remove these clamps. I'm going to set this shelf aside for right now because I still have to finish some mortise on that. I can pick up this panel and repeat the process. So now with the shelf mortised out and this side panel mortised out, I can flip it around so I can get the mortises in the bottom panel. So now I can get set up to drill the holes for the connectors on this divider panel as well as the shelf. So all I have left to do is the mortises in this panel, and then all these mortises in the bottom are done. Then I can work on the top parts. Now I can finish up the mortises on this far left panel and continue working my way towards the right side. So now I can get this clamp down and do the mortises on the top of the center divider. Now I can work on the last two tall panels. And now I'll put the corresponding mortises into the axis support. So now I can do the mortises in the bottom of the axis panel to accept the end panel. Now I can do the corresponding mortises for this end panel in the top. With all the mortises cut and all the holes for the connectors drilled out, the next step is to sand everything down, get all my pencil marks off, so then I can do a dry fit. I'm not sure how I'm going to finish mine yet. I may just put a clear poly coat on it. I may put an oil finish on there. In that case, I'm going to get all the pencil marks off. So when I'm sanding large surface areas, I like to jump up to a 6-inch sander like the Rotex. It may not seem like a lot, but just jumping from a 5-inch pad to a 6-inch pad gives me 30% more sanding surface area than with the 5-inch. So I've gone ahead and put 120 grit granite on here. That's typically what plywood's sanded to. So I'll go ahead and sand all the marks off. I'm going to be sanding in Rotex mode. So let's get to sanding. So with the joinery completed and the sanding completed, the next steps are going to be dry assembly, edge banding, and final assembly. If you want to continue with the build, click here or check this out. Don't forget to subscribe. If you want to be notified when we upload new content, click that notification bell.